Hello, and welcome back for another week of Read It First by Lisa Gray, a podcast dedicated to discussing a new book each week. This week, the discussion is over Jurassic Park by Micheal Crichton. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you'll never miss the next discussion. Jurassic Park has a very special spot in my heart, as it is the movie that first got me interested in science, alongside Twister and a few others. The book is just as phenomenal as the movie, but it's definitely different. So be prepared for complete 360 in some points if you've not read the book yet. The beginning of the novel starts with Compsognathus attacking children in Costa Rica. This, of course, is similar to the beginning of Jurassic Park 2, in where the Compies are attacking the little girl. These attacks are brought to the attention of Dr. Alan Grant, who, like in the movies, is a renowned paleontologist. But they're sent via a fax from a lab at Columbia University, who asked him to help identify these unknown lizards with 3 toes. Of course, Dr. Alan Grant is able to determine from the fax that it's a dinosaur, but before he can do much more than that, John Hammond invites Grant and his research partner, Dr. Ali Sattler, to Isla Nublar off the coast of Costa Rica to be consultants for a zoo called Jurassic Park. Obviously, Grant feels obligated to go since Hammond's a huge financial supporter of Grant's research for his own reasons, that being the creation of the hoped large money-making Jurassic Park. Hammond still owns Engine in the book and works with Dr. Wu, who has created the dinosaurs with genetic engineering technology. Unbeknownst to Grant, it's using his work to get the samples needed to create these dinosaurs. So everything that he's sending off to Hammond, Hammond is using to create new dinosaurs, which obviously is the primary reason that Hammond supports Grant. He wants the money that he knows this park could bring in. I have to admit that if this was part of the deal in the movie, they hit it quite well. It really felt like Hammond was a dinosaur enthusiast in the movie. Even after reading this, I still watch the movie, and I don't see Hammond being as nefarious, but he definitely is overbearing and a little unrealistic in some points. But I don't feel like he's doing anything that was as big of a risk as what it felt like in the book. Yet, even though Hammond is about to take risks, he includes Donald Gennaro, his lawyer, and Ian Malcolm, a mathematician, along with Grant and Sattler, to check out the park to determine if it's safe for visitors. I think the Hammond in the book only performs this step so that everything can be signed off by the lawyer and the government so that he can open the park. If he could have gotten around it all, I have no doubt that he would have jumped straight into a grand opening, probably around the same time that everyone was coming for their first visit. But since we're talking about other people that are only visiting the park and won't actually work full-time at the park, we have to discuss Dennis Nedry. Everyone who's seen the movie will automatically think of Wayne Knight, who did an amazing performance. And just like in the movie, Nedry is a computer tech who single-handedly created the park's network. He designed it to need a minimal amount of staff, decreasing cost as there wouldn't be as many handlers or drivers necessary. Nedry, as we discover in the movie as well, is also working for the Biosyn Corporation, a rival bioengineering company who are hell-bent on creating a similar park to Engine's Jurassic Park. And also, as we learn later, they're also trying to create dinosaurs that they can use for like military operations and selling them to individuals just as pets, just to make even more bang for their buck. So Biosyn offered Nedry a lot of money to steal 15 dinosaur embryos from the island in a hollowed-out Gillette shaving can. As you notice in the movies, it's Barbasol. But it just depends on who pays more for the advertising, what name goes where. And just like in the movie, Tim and Lex, Hammond's grandchildren, come to the island. There's a few large differences that are noticed here. The first one that really threw me off is that Grant really likes kids in the book and took to Tim really quickly. Second, Tim is the older sibling, not Lex. Tim is also the computer geek. Lex, on the other hand, is a baseball enthusiast and mostly terrified during the duration of the book. A lot of times she's whining and crying and has to be carried around by Grant in order to actually survive the park, which, even though Spielberg switched this around because he really liked the kid that played Tim, so that's why he decided Tim to be the younger, and then he figured, well, since Lex is the oldest, we'll keep with the computer aspect, which I loved because there's not a lot of stuff, especially in the early 90s, that it's like, oh, the female is the computer savvy, the one that's saving everything. And finally, you learn that Hammond only begrudgingly lets his grandchildren come to the park. He's not a loving grandfather or even a great person. Hammond's primary drive is all about making money, and this drive sometimes overwhelms his ability to make a fair and proper judgment. Now, just like in the movie, Malcolm predicts that the island is doomed for disaster. He quotes his chaos theory that inevitably something is going to go wrong. I mean, that's fair, that it is a life. The lawyer, however, is concerned about the whole legal safety aspect. Essentially, how many people are going to sue them if things go wrong? However, of course, once he starts to see the dinosaurs, he starts seeing money signs because he's like, holy shit, this can make a lot of money for us. Awesome. Grant is concerned about the fact that they created dinosaurs in the first part. You're creating creatures that have not existed for millennia. You have creatures that have been extinct for thousands and thousands of years, and you have no idea how they're going to react. Plus, I mean, what are you splicing them with? They do discuss the fact that they are splicing it with frog DNA and just filling in the points. But depending on the type of frog, that can produce its own issues. Sattler is excited as she's a paleobotanist, and now she gets to see all the plants that she's been researching in person. I have to say that as someone that would be researching things that were in the past and all you can do is theorize about things, I think this would be pretty freaking awesome. I was enthralled with the idea until about my freshman undergraduate biology class, when we were discussing DNA and my teacher mentions that, oh yeah, Jurassic Park could never happen because the DNA would not have survived in the amber in that mosquito this long. So it kind of made me sad, but I still love the movies and I still love biology. Anyways, just like in the movie, Grant, Malcolm, Tim, and Lex go on the park tour. But in this case, they're going with publicist Ed Regis. And as you notice, Sattler and the lawyer Gennaro aren't included on the list. While on the park tour in the computer-driven jeeps, this is when Nedry shuts down the entire security system for the park so that he can steal those embryos and get them off the island to a ship scheduled to meet him. Unfortunately, the entire system starts to malfunction, and Nedry gets lost on his way to the dock. This, of course, is where he meets up with the Dilophosaur, which is that poison-spitting dinosaur that we all think of. A quick mention here is that per the Natural History Museum, there's no proof that the Dilophosaur actually spit poison or had the large neck frills shown in Jurassic Park. However, upon discussions with Crichton, he admits that he did this to show that manipulating the DNA can cause some unexpected side effects that are not true to the original characteristics. Due to Nedry's disappearance and subsequent death, John Arnold, the park engineer, has to work to fix the system malfunction that occurred after Nedry tried to shut down only the security system. While all this is happening, the electric-guided jeeps that Grant, Malcolm, Ed, Tim, and Lex are in get stopped outside of the Tyrannosaurus enclosure. Ironically, while there, the group is able to see the ship that's supposed to be leaving the island. Lex uses binoculars and notices that there are a bunch of small dinosaurs that are storing themselves away on that ship, getting ready to leave the island. I imagine that this was both curious and terrifying as they had no idea what dinosaur at that time was hitching a ride on the ship. Also, there's that concern that if that ship arrives on the mainland, then dinosaurs are free to attack and kill people. So the computer system malfunction impacts the electrical fences around the dinosaur enclosures, allowing the Tyrannosaurus to break out. Ed gets eaten, not the lawyer. Malcolm gets injured, just like in the movie. And Grant takes the kids to flee into the park, just like in the movie. Luckily, Hammond was at least practical enough to have a game warden for the park by the name of Robert Muldoon. Muldoon and Gennaro go off to search for everyone after they determine the enclosures aren't electrified anymore and the jeeps have stopped moving. So as you notice, this is a little different because it's Sattler that goes with Muldoon in the movie. Anyways, they find Malcolm and return him to the care of Sattler and Dr. Harding, which is the park's veterinarian, who are located in the Safari Lodge. One thing they don't really mention in the movie, but that they do mention in the book, is that Sattler is getting ready to marry a doctor, a primary care physician, in about a year. So Arnold is finally able to fix the computer system and restore power. Meanwhile, Muldoon and Gennaro head off to find the Tyrannosaurus, and Grant makes his way back to the visitor center with the kids, all while they're avoiding the Tyrannosaurus again and pterodactyls, because they come in close contact with both of those. During the way back to the visitor center, Grant finds that nest with the hatched eggs in the park, which proves that the dinosaurs have been breeding even though they were all bred to be female. Which this is the whole part of why you avoid doing things with reptilian and amphibian DNA, because certain of those species can switch their sex based on the need of the environment. Obviously, if everyone's female, they need males, so they were able to do that. So when Grant and kids return to the visitor center, the power fails again. During this power failure, the velociraptors break out. They manage to kill Arnold while he's attempting to turn on the generator, since the main power failed. And then they surround the Safari Lodge where Malcolm, Sattler, Harding, Wu, and Muldoon, and Hammond are located. Grant leaves Tim and Lex in the cafeteria at the visitor center while he goes out to attempt to get the power back on. Just like in the movie, the two kids are in the cafeteria, are stalked by a velociraptor. But in this case, it's only one. And Tim, just like in the movie, manages to lock it in the freezer. Both Tim and Lex head out throughout the center to try to find the computer room. While trying to get the power back on, Wu is attacked and killed by the raptors while helping Sattler distract the raptors from Grant so he can get to the generator shed. So basically, they saw Grant taking off towards the generator shed, saw the velociraptors, and knew that if they didn't do anything, he would die. So Sattler and Ruth's like, we can't let that happen. Let's go out and distract him. Unfortunately, that led to Wu's death, which, if they would have kept that in the movies, that would have definitely impacted the whole aspect of the Jurassic World series, because they use Dr. Wu in all of those. Anyways, Grant is able successfully to get the generator turned on, and he finds Gennaro, who had disappeared earlier, in the process. Tim and Lex manage to find the computer room with all the adults, and Tim works to correct the computer system since the power is back on. He's able to get the electrified fences reactivated just before the raptors were able to penetrate the electrified bars on the Safari Lodge skylight. Close call, right? So Tim manages also to call the supply ship just before it docks in Costa Rica. Lucky timing. Gennaro tells them to immediately turn around because there are velociraptors on board. I'll be honest, it's been a hot minute since I've been able to read this book, as I couldn't get it easily this week. I don't remember exactly how they determined that they were velociraptors. I believe it was just the knowledge that the velociraptors were actively breeding and knowing about the size. But it may have been that Grant had seen it in the binoculars, so I apologize for not remembering that. It's been a hot minute. But the crew was damn lucky to survive the journey to the mainland without getting murdered by these velociraptors, because as we know, they are hunters. But since they were able to get the ship turned around, Grant, Gennaro, Sattler, and Muldoon start a search of the island to determine just how many velociraptors have been born. So hopefully they can figure out, based on the previous numbers and how many there are currently on the island, how many get off the island onto the boat. So later, whenever they're finally ready to leave the lodge, Hammond kind of is diddle-daddling, and he ends up tripping and falling down a ravine where he breaks an ankle and gets attacked and eaten by compies. It's kind of fair. He's been an ass throughout the entire movie. Malcolm sadly dies as they're trying to remove him from the lodge. His wounds from the T-Rex attack were just too intense. Again, this is sad because this would have made the entire series so different, because Ian Malcolm is huge in number 1, number 2, so The Lost World, the original Jurassic Park. He even came back in Jurassic World 3 and played a huge part in that. So it definitely would have been upsetting to not have him survive, because even though I'm sure they would have found someone else, I liked that continuity throughout the movies of characters, because it really just kind of helps mesh the idea that they're all the same series. So the Costa Rica National Guard arrives on the island to remove everyone, and they tell them that they're going to blow up the island. Well, again, this would have changed some stuff, and obviously Jurassic World never would have happened because Isla Nublar would have been nothing. However, the second and third movies for the Jurassic Park series could have still happened, because those happened on Isla Sonar. That is the research island of Jurassic Park. However, not many people know about its existence, so obviously they couldn't have destroyed it. So they take the entire group that survived captive in the Costa Rican government. While there, Grant's approached by a local about unidentified lizards who are traveling in packs, but they have disappeared into the jungle and they cannot find them anymore. Obviously, Grant is fairly certain that these are the compies that he saw the facts for in the beginning of the book. But knowing that dinosaurs were escaping the island for God knows how long on the supply ships, it could be almost anything. But since the compies are more scavenging animals, more than likely that was what they were. Because the velociraptors, you would know, because they were hunters. Eventually, everyone's released and they get to go back to the United States. So, obviously, there is a lot of difference between the movie and the novel. And if the book was followed more, then holy crap, the differences, then everything would have been outstandingly different. Malcolm's death really saddened me, because as I'm reading the book, I'm imagining Jeff Goldblum as Malcolm, because, I mean, I've never read the book before the movie came out, because the movie came out whenever I was still young. So obviously I hadn't had the time to read the book yet. I didn't even know that there was a book whenever I saw the movie, obviously. But as the third Jurassic Park movie came out, I was getting more heavily into it all. So I remember reading some of those books that got incorporated in with the Jurassic Park 3 movie, because I thought the character of Eric was really interesting at that point. So just to kind of go back over a few different things that I thought was interesting. So in the movie, you really got a sense of a relationship between Grant and Sattler. And the entire time you're like, oh, well, why aren't they together? Well, now the book gave us a lot more information on that, of the fact that, well, she was engaged to be married. But in the book, they also have more of a mentor-mentee relationship. She just looked up to him, and he adored her because she was so brilliant for her age, which is fair. I loved the fact that Grant liked the kids in the movie, or in the book. I don't understand why they didn't keep that aspect, because it's not like it made much difference, but it's also interesting that they made Tim a dinosaur enthusiast, because Lex definitely was not that way in the movie or in the book. So it's weird that they kept some of the aspects, but then they switched different aspects. Like in the movie, Lex was still into baseball. She's wearing a baseball cap throughout majority of the movie, or at least at the beginning of the movie, before the T-Rex attacks and kills Gennaro and injures Malcolm. They never discussed the ill Triceratops. They don't really discuss that at all, whereas that's a semi-large part of the movie. They do discuss the incoming storm, which I do like the idea that the storm was supposed to be so big and so bad, which is why everyone was trying to get off the island. That was not necessary. Yet they kept on with the whole tour instead of being like, hey, let's delay it by a couple of days, because, that would have made sense. But also, it was just like a heavy downpour, and then it was done. It wasn't this heavy, thick system that I anticipated. And that is somewhat continuous with the book. So one of the other big differences that I thought was interesting is that they pulled some of the details from this book and put it into the other books, particularly the compies attacking the little girl at the beginning of Jurassic Park 2, which is actually what was happening at the beginning of Jurassic Park. Now, I do want to make a note that at the beginning of the movie, they do have Muldoon watching over a velociraptor getting put into her cage, and the worker gets attacked. That is the same as in the book. The big difference is that in the book, we learn that the worker that got pulled in did not die. They were able to save the worker, and they had to take him to Costa Rica to get medical care. And when they get there, first off, it's a big storm that's hitting. So they're really impressed that the copper was able to even take off, let alone land to get the medical care. But they find 3 humongous gash wounds, and they know that this is not anything that they have ever seen animal-wise, especially for the Costa Rican area. So I thought that was interesting. I think that could have been kept in the movie, because I think that would have been interesting to know that, hey, this guy did survive this attack, at least initially. If I remember correctly, he did die in the book, which is unfortunate, but things happen. The whole compies attacking the children at the beginning of the book, the only way that they're able to catch what they are is by taking a sample of the foot imprint. So based on the foot imprint and size, that's how Grant is able to more or less determine that it's a Compsognathus. So it's kind of interesting that no other reptile in this time period had a similar foot structure, because there's so much that is consistent between dinosaurs and reptiles and even birds now. But I guess, to be fair, whenever Micheal Crichton wrote the books, we all thought that dinosaurs were closer to reptiles, not to birds. So that is one interesting thing, that as you get further in the Jurassic World series, you notice a lot more feathers. And that they've added some extra, feathers to the top of the velociraptors' heads. Well, if you've ever seen a picture of what they think the velociraptors look like now that they know that they're closely related to birds, it's a little terrifying, because it looks like those little shits can fly, and they're terrifying enough without having that aspect. But it makes sense. How else would I mean, lizards don't go up onto their back feet, except for rarely. Like the Komodo dragon can do it so that it can climb up things. But they don't really stand upright. However, birds do. And it would also explain why the Tyrannosaurus had really short, stubby arms, because birds have wings, but they don't really have the arm structure to do much. The Spinosaurus aegyptius that you see in the third movie, that's a little different because that mofo had big arms. And potentially that one was a little bit more reptilian. I mean, in our current world, dinosaurs, they don't exist, but good grief, crocodiles, alligators, they've been around for a long time. So they are probably our closest relatives that we can find to living dinosaurs. They've also discussed that, like, the ostrich and the emu are probably pretty closely related to the dinosaurs still. But one big thing that we kind of ignore with being with the dinosaurs are sharks. However, sharks were very different back then. They had their teeth coming from the outside of their mouth, not the inside of their mouth. So imagine this like curly Q lip coming outside of their mouth, and that's where the teeth grew, on the inside of the curly Q, and it would slowly rotate in to place as it was needed, at least for the bottom. So very different. But if you think about it, the megalodon, that thing's, as far as we know, has been extinct for a long time. Now, if there's one hiding in the depths of the ocean, who knows? I mean, there's so much of the ocean that we've not been able to explore. If you go on the basis of the Meg movie, or Dinotopia, or so many of the other sci-fi movies that have to do with dinosaurs, Journey to the Center of the Earth, there could be another area on this Earth that we have never found that still has some of these critters. Now, if it's like in Kong and there's enormous insects and spiders and bugs, I can do without ever seeing that. But I think it would be amazing to be able to actually have pictures of what these dinosaurs have evolved to. Because obviously they're not going to be the same as what they once were. Because we only have one sun. So there's no way that they'd have their own sun internally unless it uses the core of the earth, which could provide a different aspect. But regardless, that's not the culture that they were, it's not the environment that they were created in. So it's still interesting to me that there's so much that could have changed. And potentially, as the world keeps eating itself away, we might find something new. And, well, we'll see what goes from there. Anyway, sorry about the semi-tangent, but just a few little interesting tidbits of different knowledge. And some of it may have changed since I last read it, so if it has, I apologize. But thank you so much for listening this week. Next week, we are going to discuss The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This book was recommended by Anne Hathaway in one of her top lists, so I figured I'd give it a go. So in Margaret Atwood's dystopian future, environmental disasters and declining birth rates have led to a second American Civil War. The result is the rise of the Republic of Gilead, a totalitarian regime that forces rigid social roles and enslaves the few remaining fertile women. Alfred is one of these, a handmaid bound to produce children for one of Gilead's commanders. Deprived of her husband, her child, her freedom, and even her own name, Alfred clings to the memories and her will to survive. At once a scathing satire, an ominous warning, and a tour de force of narrative suspense, The Handmaid's Tale is a modern classic. Let's pray that this isn't one that actually might happen in the future, because God knows our reproductive rights are being questioned now. So, Remember to read the book. If you don't get around to it, no problem. You can listen whenever. And remember to subscribe to the Read It First channel so you never miss out on a new discussion. Have a great week, everyone.